Hey everyone, welcome to Getting Started with GameMaker Studio 2. This is a brand new tutorial series where we're going to cover the very basics of GameMaker Studio 2 so you could build a game. If you've never used GameMaker Studio or you've never programmed, this is going to be the tutorial series that covers that. So we're going to get into GML, which is GameMaker Studio's language, and the fundamentals of that. So if you're new to programming and you don't even know how to use a loop, we'll cover that too. So I want to teach all of that to you guys, and we're going to build on those skills to get more and more advanced so we can do really complex stuff and get into things like shaders, application services, and particles. So there's a lot of cool stuff that we'll get to. But this is going to be the introduction to the tool, GameMaker Studio, and we'll get something on the screen just to get started and use those as tools to explain the different elements and different programming stuff that we'll be doing. So let's jump right into it. And this is the first screen that you'll see after you've downloaded it and signed up. You can actually download and sign up for the beta and get a trial version that's free. There are some limitations on how many sprites and objects that you can have, so be aware of that. When we get to the more advanced stuff like shaders way down the road and you're still trying to follow along, at that point you will eventually have to purchase the tool, but for the beginning stuff, you're going to be fine. Okay, things to cover first. This is the first screen you'll see when you start up GameMaker Studio. And one thing I want to point out is this right here is where you're going to say, hey, open up an existing project, import an existing project, or create a new one. We'll start with creating a new one. But I wanted to show you something down here, which is the tutorials. I encourage you guys to take a look at this stuff. These are actually pretty good. They're not videos, but they are, when you open up, they show a bar on the left side that kind of walk you through some of the different elements about the IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment, sorry. So if you want to get more details, I encourage you guys to take a look at this. All right, we're going to go back and just go ahead and jump right into it. So let's create a new project. You have two options, drag and drop or GameMaker language. Since we're going to be programming, we're going to focus on GML. And we'll go ahead and click that. The first thing you'll need to do is name your project. So we're going to call it tutorial project. And here's the first screen that you'll see. So the main things to be aware of here is this is your workspace. This is where you're going to work in. You're going to have different windows that are going to be opened up here, like sprites and images. You're going to have your rooms and stuff like that. But just know that you can customize all of this. I can actually have multiple workspaces. Each of these workspaces can have different windows open or even overlapping windows. It could have the same windows open and you can organize them in different ways. This is pretty cool. This is going to help you organize your workflow for creating a project the way you need to so you can work most efficiently. On the left over here, we have our resources. This is all the important stuff that we need to build out our project. This is where the images are going to be stored, the rooms and levels, the code that we're going to use for building out our game. Let's go ahead and build something real quick. I think it's important to get started pretty quickly and then later cover more details and get in more depth. Just to get started, there's three things that we're going to do. We're going to create a sprite, which is the image. We're going to assign it to an object, which is going to store the information about our, say, a player. In this case, we're going to create a player. And we're going to put it in a room so it shows up. So let's do that real quick. We're going to right-click here, create. And this is our sprite editor that showed up in our workspace now. If I created a new workspace, it's not here. You can see it's in this workspace. I can move this window around if I had multiple windows over here. I can even zoom in and zoom out by pressing Control and moving the middle mouse wheel up and down to zoom in and zoom out. And if you want to get it back to fit the way it was, if you're zoomed out, you can double click the top bar here and it will kind of bring it back to where it was. Now, if you want to move around this window, say you want this to be scooted over more center, you can click out here in this empty space and hit space, and holding them at the same time, you can actually drag it around. And this would actually drag every window around. So it's kind of like moving you around in this space. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to name our sprite. We're going to name it SPR_player. And I encourage you guys to find a naming convention that works for you. Most people prefix this, and it makes it easier in code later to go find stuff that's a sprite. You can say SPR_ and find it. This is the size. You can change this to whatever size that you want. If you're working in a smaller pixel type game, or you're working in a big high definition game, you can change these. Or it could be very, very large assets that are in your levels. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and edit this image. We're going to leave this the way it is for now. We're going to click Edit Image, which did nothing. Let's do that again. All right, so this opened up a new tab for us. When we do something like this, when we get a new tab like this that's not in the workspace, this is the specific image editor that we're working with. And it has its own tools over here, like brushes, the colors that we're working with, and the actual toolboxes. You have layers here, so we can actually build images like you would in Photoshop with different layers and work with those layers. The same thing applies as we were in the workspace where you can zoom in, zoom out. You can actually press Control on the mouse wheel and zoom out and move back in. And you can actually press space and click and move around here. So if we were zoomed in really far, we could actually move around. So what you have here are brushes. The brushes come in different sizes. That's just how big the brush shows up here, as you can see. You have your colors, and then you have your different tools. And the main tools you'll work with are, you might work with all of them, but probably the pencil tool and the eraser tool. So get the eraser tool out, and it uses the brushes up here too. Or the fill bucket, which is what we're going to use. This is going to be our sprite for now. Very simple. We're going to start off with the bare bones. Okay, when we're done with this, let's just go ahead and close it. And we're going to close this because we don't need anything in that workspace. So now our sprite player has an image. As sophisticated as it is, it has an image. The next thing we're going to do is create an object. Okay, right click, create object, and we can go down here and we can name our object. We'll name it OBJ player. Same thing applies. Find a naming convention that works for you. And the first thing we're going to do is attach an image or a sprite to this. We're going to click on that sprite and attach it. And now our object has an image associated to it that can show up. I'm not going to get into the events of this. We're going to cover a lot of that in the next tutorial. I'll get more in depth with objects and events and how to use those as we start moving towards code. I just wanted to get something up on the screen for you guys for now. We're going to go to rooms. So rooms are the last thing that we're going to cover here, which is rooms are basically your levels. This is, you have to have a room for anything to show up in the game. So we're going to open that up, and that's going to open up the room editor, which is a new tab. And it's basically whatever name that we have here. So we're going to double click on that. We'll also name that. We're going to use the naming standard RM, and we'll just call it test. Same shortcuts apply. Control, mouse wheel, zooms in, zooms out. Space and dragging will move you around inside. Those are pretty important when you're trying to do a lot of editing. Okay, some things you need to note about our space here. The room editor has these three boxes here. The first is the layers, very similar to an image layer, but they're layers to the room. You could have backgrounds. You can have instances. Instances are going to hold our objects. And then you can have tiles, I believe. That's an instance layer. This is the tile layer, path layer. We are eventually mostly going to cover tiles, instances, and backgrounds as far as layers, but we'll get into that later. Our room properties here, we can actually drag this up to see more of it. The size of our room, so it determines how big this box basically is, how big this level would be, in width and height. And then there's other elements that we'll again cover in future episodes, like views and cameras. Those are really important, but you don't need it to start off with. And room physics, if we got into physics, we're not going to cover that right now. So let's say we wanted our player to show up. How do you do that? Well, it's pretty simple. You actually just go to your resources over here and you drag him over. So We've got them. So the cool thing about objects, so objects are really just the instructions that hold information about your player, your zombie, or whatever it is that you have. And you can actually have instances of them. And an instance is the actual thing that's in your room. So you can have multiples of whatever it is. And those are considered instances, 3 different instances that are in the room. So now we have our player object in our room. And we can actually go ahead and test this to see if this works. And this is the bare bones that you need. Nothing's going to happen, of course, because we put no code in here for it to do anything. But we got something to show up on the screen, which if you had to hand code this, say in C++ or C#, there's a lot more work that you'd have to do to get all that to work. Now we've got something showing up on the screen. Okay, so I wanted to stop there as far as this episode. These are the 3 basic things that you need to get something on the screen. In the next episode, we're going to start playing with those objects a little bit more. I'm going to talk a lot more about what's in those objects and go into a little bit more depth about those and start on our path to learning how to code. All right. Thanks for watching. As always, if you have any questions or comments, leave those below. Please give some feedback on how this goes and what do you want to learn in Game Maker Studio 2 that would help you make your game. All right. Thanks.